Why was Spartan training so impressive? Why was it such a stronghold of masculinity? And what does that do to a society? I want to explore this with commentary as we go through this. The video description, the original source is below in the video description. Please enjoy. Let's take a look at this, see if we learn anything awesome.
Not unlike. It is said there was a time when the citizens of Sparta were not unlike any others in ancient Greece. After all, they shared a common culture, language, religion, and lifestyle, so there was really no way of being superior in anything. Herodotus even says Spartans were the worst governed people in all of Greece. That is, of course, until Sparta came under the influence of the legendary lawgiver Lycurgus. It was he who supposedly came up with the Spartan constitution, among which was the Agoge, a system of education and training to be completed by every Spartan citizen. Most Greek cities also had a similar system in place.
Agoge. I wonder what it would happen if we incorporated Agoge into the United States of America. What would happen to the men?
But it was Lycurgus's that was so revolutionary for its time that it allowed the Spartans to dominate everyone who dared meet them in the field, and in their prime, allowed them to stand undefeated for over 150 years. In this video, we will reveal the fascinating methods behind Lycurgus's innovative training system. Before we begin though, I'd like to introduce the sponsor. I like this series, standing it off out not wondering Moria. As Lycurgus gazed upon the lazy, mediocre citizens of Sparta, he decided that his
lazy, mediocre citizens of Sparta, does that sound a little contemporary today? I don't know. Do we have lazy men, or are all men extremely, absolutely strong and well equipped? Or are they all many emotional and lost and confused and feel scared and purposelessness and directionlessness, and they don't have a strong sense of self? They don't have any pride within themselves. They let themselves go physically. 70% of the population is overweight. So I would say that this is also contemporary today.
His people were in need of a different concept of upbringing. At the center of this idea was his belief that healthy, disciplined, able-bodied individuals are integral to a successful and functioning society. So his system was to be extended to every young Spartan citizen, male and female. And though the girls were excluded from the more rigorous and extreme system of the Agoge, they were still expected to perform the same exercises as the boys, like fighting and running, as it was believed that both parents had to be in peak condition in order to produce the best possible offspring.
Love that philosophy. I absolutely love that philosophy. I think it's absolutely beautiful.
To our modern eyes, Lycurgus's system represents an interesting and extreme experiment that can't be replicated today. What would happen if an entire community was isolated from the rest of the world and brought up through constant discipline, physical exercise, and resistance to struggle, with these being held as a social norm and reason for existence of every individual? In theory, this would produce a perfect society of tough individuals, with built-in qualities to show respect, endure the struggles of life, and always strive for perfection. But now let us see how
I think those are absolute amazing goals. I think that's incredible goals. I wonder what, again, would happen if we had young men who went through this process of training. They probably wouldn't be bogged down by their emotions. They probably would be a lot stronger from within, which means they're more tempered in life. They're not emotionally reactive. And we like to give the toxic trait to masculinity. But what I say is masculinity is a strong pillar in a man that makes him able and capable to take care of his rawness or emotionality from within. And it gives us a system to not be dangerous to society, but well equipped to know that we're absolutely dangerous when required. There's a big distinction between a weak man, who I feel is way more dangerous than a strong man, because a weak man, he's lost control. And when a man loses control and gets emotional, that's a scary thing, because you don't know what he's capable of because he's lost. Sadhguru says that when you go mad, I got mad. What Sadhguru says is, no, you've gone mad. You've lost total control of your own self. And I think there's strong merit in what that means.
Lycurgus implemented his idea into a real system, and if it achieved the intended results he wanted. For the boys, the system was divided into 3 categories: children, adolescents, and young adults. The first category was very similar in idea to a modern boarding school. Young Spartans would leave their families to learn letters, music, poetry, singing, and sport.
Awesome.
Other Greek city-states had a similar system, but relied on private pedagogues to teach their children. The Spartan system, on the other hand, was more communal, in which one man was chosen to be in charge of the boys as their paidonomos, or supervisor. This highly important role of bringing up the next generation of Spartans was only open to those who were eligible for election to the highest offices. It was the job of the supervisor to make sure young Spartans became loyal, resourceful, disciplined, and accustomed to extensive physical activity.
Beautiful so far. I mean, absolutely beautiful.
Most importantly, though, as the writer Plutarch nicely puts it, the Agoge was a school of obedience. The supervisor was given power to punish the boys as he saw fit, and always commanded a group of older boys with whips to enforce his punishments. And to make sure the boys were never left without a supervisor, he allowed every citizen to take on his role when he wasn't around, and to order the boys to do whatever seemed appropriate. And yes, citizens were also allowed to punish the boys if they did anything wrong.
Okay, so listen to this. This sounds, oh, it's insane. You're going to whip boys. Well, here's the thing, is I grew up in a small town in Kansas back in the 90s, and I had a coach who coached for like 50 years, and he was on his later end of retirement. So this guy coached a long time, and he had strict discipline in our sports. And my coaches were extremely hard on me. And listen, strong men are not tyrants. They don't beat these kids. They do it to eliminate the weakness in the kid, to show him he's much stronger than what he thinks he's capable of. So it's a tactic and a tool to make me, listen, I would have not become the man I am today or the athlete that I was if it wasn't for these strong men who made me overcome my weaknesses by beating the shit out of me metaphorically. And that was through drills. That was through like when I didn't want to go. You know, they made you. It was a requirement to like show up. And we also had peer pressure. Like people would shame us if we were weak. We wouldn't allow it as a team either. And so you had to do it. There was no copping out of it. And so just realize that these aren't weak, tyrannical men who are just doing this because they have egos. They're doing it because they have a system of creating strong boys to overcome their own weaknesses. Do you see the distinction there? So I think to bring a school or a system in place that does this with strong leadership, these are the top of the top in the society that were the paidonomos. I mean, these were well-crafted, probably very virtuous, peak performance men. And so they knew what was required to make men like him. And so I think this is a beautiful system. Who knows if we created systems like this today, what would happen to our modern society and how it might be of great benefit to the society.
Wrong. For these reasons, the boys were accustomed to being respectful to everyone and only spoke when spoken to. Xenophon even writes that the boys would always walk around with a low gaze so as to not provoke anyone. This instillment of heavy discipline and respect was the first step of their training. When the boys of other Greek cities became teenagers, they were released by their pedagogues and private teachers into the world, and no one was in charge of them anymore. Spartan teenagers, however, only entered into their second stage of the Agoge. Lycurgus recognized that it was in this age category, when going through puberty, that boys are the most adventurous and troublesome. So in keeping with his system, he enforced even more hardships and labor on the boys. They were to have only one cloak to stay warm all year, and had to walk barefoot in order to strengthen their feet. For Lycurgus believed that if their feet were properly accustomed, they could run faster and jump higher than.
This is true. When I lived in Hawaii, I could not walk on lava rock barefooted. It felt like I was walking on needles. But after a few months, I built up a resistance where walking on lava rock was no issue at all. So I can only imagine how much more my feet could grow to not be would be toughened up. That's kind of cool. Like my feet, I have city feet again. Like I can't even walk on gravel without it hurting.
Anyone in footwear. At this age, they were also taught to fight with weapons and march collectively in full silence
Dang.
under the rhythm of music.
That's awesome.
These silent marches would be used as a psychological.
This just reminds me of playing sports. Like, those 2-3 hours of practice, man. It's really drills, and this is cool.
Weapon in battle, as most armies did not have the discipline to pull this off, and it would be offsetting for anyone to witness a seemingly emotionless and confident army face off against them. Interestingly, collective dancing.
So this reminds me that when we had particularly in football, when we were warming up in football, we had to all be in unison with our drills. Like if they were jumping jacks or whatever stretching we were doing in our dynamic warm up, how we would run out to the field was orchestrated, and we had to run down the lines together. And it was all orchestrated and seamless. And we did look like a machine. Like I said, my coach was old, and so everything mattered. When we traveled for basketball, we would wear blazers, all the same color. We would dress up to impress because that's intimidating. And so imagine you have like these armies that most of them don't really march seamlessly. But then you see an army where they are so in alignment, you're like, shit, these guys are good. And so that's the impression that I didn't realize at the time that my coach wanted to give to us. There was no facial hair at the time too. So he wouldn't even let you get on the bus to go to the game if you had any facial hair. He'd give you a dry razor. So he'd give you a razor with no shaving cream and said, go shave, or you're not getting on the bus. So this is what I mean. This is the tactician of the man who made really strong boys that just wanted to, really not be that disciplined. And and what happened is he has the most wins in the state of Kansas for football. He coached for a long time, but he also had a winning record every single season too. The guy was a legend. He was doing things right, and his system is a very small slice of maybe the Spartan training here.
Known as Pirikios, was also performed by the Spartans. These war dances were essentially repetitive compound movements in full arms and armor, which would strengthen countless muscles in the body and improve their overall balance and cohesion. As you can probably tell by now, Spartan training was not focused on extensive muscle growth of any kind. Instead, it was aimed at improving speed, agility, and muscle memory. So we could expect the average Spartan body to not be overly muscular, but instead nimble and lean, carrying just enough weight and muscle for optimal physical performance. Complementing this point is the fact that Spartan youths were never fully sated and were always hungry to some degree. Xenophon explains it was to encourage them to steal, but if any were caught stealing, they received a beating, not so much for the act of stealing, but for being caught doing it. This was all part of the second stage of their training, which ensured they were resourceful and had a high resistance to hunger and pain. Even their resistance to the cold was constantly tested, as they would bathe in the cold waters of the Eurotas River, under the concrete opinion that bathing in hot water made one a coward. The recurring theme in Lycurgus's system of rationing, training, and clothing Spartan youths was to make them more self-controlled in regard to their needs.
Bingo, self-control. That's a strong man. I really want you guys to get out of this propaganda of what a strong man really is and how actually safe a strong man is versus a weak man.
In other words, it made the boys more content and indifferent with having less food, clothing, and personal possessions. This was in hopes that when a difficult situation inevitably does present itself, Spartan citizens would be more likely to recover and care for themselves in comparison to other Greeks, who were accustomed to being provided with minor comforts and luxuries. To further discipline them, they were ordered when in public to hide their hands under their cloak, walk silently, and keep their eyes fixed on the ground. Xenophon even says you would be more likely to see a stone speak or a bronze statue turn its eyes than them, who would reserve their words for only when spoken to. When the boys grew into young men, Lycurgus focused the most time and effort on them, because he believed they were the city's greatest asset. In this stage, he especially focused on bringing out their sense of competitiveness and teamwork, for he believed this was the best way to have the men push themselves to the limit of their abilities. In today's world, this can be seen in professional sports, and Lycurgus did a great job of implementing that mindset for the purpose of war. Xenophon explains how he did this. Out of all the young men, he would assign 3 strong leaders to each handpick the best 100 among themselves to be in their team. Each of the 3 leaders would also have to give a reason for each choice and rejection. Then these leaders and their chosen groups would be pitted in various activities and battles against the very men they rejected. This resulted in a lot of competition, as each selected man wanted to prove that he belonged there. And
Competition makes us better. When I meet someone that's better skilled at, let's say I'm going to go do boxing or martial arts or the PC game I play on, Rainbow Six Siege. I'm a top 0.5% of 1% top player. It's usually top 5,000 every season, usually a little bit lower. And when I meet someone that's better than me, like that competition, there's something that makes us both better. Does that make sense? If we don't have anybody who's pushing us beyond our own comfort, because we can do it, yes, we can't reach higher. And so competition is so good, so good.
each rejected one wanted to prove he was underestimated. We are told the contests that ensued were always fierce, with each man pushing himself for the victory of his group. Such intense competition even resulted in fistfights between the members of the groups, but were always separated and punished to remind each man that their inner contests should never be above their obedience to the law. We can imagine that their contests would extend even onto the battlefield, where although the groups stand side by side, each would strive to outperform the other and be the last to flee. Unlike with the recruitment of the Roman legions, where men were selected based on stature and strength, it can be said that each Spartan, male or female, would be in great shape as they enter adulthood, and anyone slightly shorter or slimmer than the rest would know how to compensate in speed and vigor. We can safely say Lycurgus' system made sure that every citizen was a worthy recruit for when the need arose. When the Spartans grew out of their young adulthood, they were finally relieved of physical training. But Lycurgus ensured through social norms that their readiness for battle and pursuit of excellence carried on. For example, hunting remained the most popular leisure activity for them, as it stimulated a lot of the military hardships and gave them an urge to stay physically fit and mentally aware. Marriage was also a motivator, as only when Spartans were in peak condition were they allowed to marry and have children, as Lycurgus believed this would produce the strongest offspring. He took it even further by making it
There's a lot of memory in our DNA. And I wholeheartedly agree that the healthier you are, the more vital you are, the more vital your DNA is. And it probably does have a benefit to the children.
frowned upon for couples to spend too much time together, as it would negatively affect their competitive spirit. The last social norm, and by far the most brutal, was put in place to discourage cowardice. Anyone who fled a battle was subject to live in constant disgrace in all aspects of life. In any social gathering, they would have to give up their seats to younger men.
I mean, let's think about it. Let's say we're playing football and you're just scared of the enemy opponent, and so you walk off the field. Do you think, people should just be like, oh man, that was strong of you just to leave? No, you would be shamed. You'd be like, what a loser. You quit. You gave up on your team. You're selfish. I mean, so these are good things. It's good to shame weakness in men because it makes men want to not be weak, which again, strong men are definitely superior to a weak man who is hostile.
In the streets, they would have to give way to everyone, and even in their own families, they would have to raise the women, and were not allowed to marry and have a family of their own. On top of all this, they would have to pay a fee for being a coward for as long as they live, and could be beaten if they ever tried to act as though they were innocent in public. Cowards had to endure the most dishonorable lives, which motivated many to rather die in battle than
So I think that standard's not only just for the person and for them to learn from that experience, and that sucks for them, right? Because, but I'm sure there's ways to correct it. Like if they came around and came full circle and showed how strong and disciplined and heroic they were, they probably wouldn't be as ostracized, right? But what it does is it sets a precedence. When young kids see that man who ran away from battle, he left everyone down to he weakened the team. That's a good testament to go like, I never want to be that guy. I don't want people to see me like that. So it encourages young men to not want to be that way. So it's practically a really good thing. And I love this strong society. It's really potent. Woo!
take their place. Do you think Lycurgus' system achieved his goal of molding perfect citizen soldiers? Or were his methods a bit excessive and brutal? Let us know in the comments below.
Well, how I explained it is, I gave you guys a good kind of perspective on how these things aren't really harsh. They're actually strong. They're strong techniques to discipline weakness. And if we want amazing, honorable, virtuous men in our society. It takes beating the weakness out of us. And so I think this is really incredible. Great job to the gentleman who did this video. I'll leave the original source below. Make sure to give him a like and a subscribe. Looks like he does great work. And if you like the reactions, feel free to subscribe to my channel. Welcome to the community if you do. And I'll definitely catch you guys on the next video. Thank you so much for your time. Take care. Bye-bye.